Very much for coming, really appreciate it. Hopefully your day's gone well so far. We got some lunch. Now we're going to talk about electric vehicles. This is, I think, the first of the multiple tracks in the EV space. We're going to talk about China because, in my view, China is a big idea in EVs right now that we all need to pay attention to. I don't profess to be a China expert in a way, but I've been in the automotive business for 30 years. I worked for Ford, Jaguar Cars, in key leadership roles. I worked for Verizon in their connected services business for automotive, IBM in their IoT group for automotive, and ultimately have been watching this space for a long time and been involved in EVs kind of off and on the last 15 years. We wrote a white paper in our team about a year ago about China EVs, and this is an outgrowth of that. So hopefully it's interesting. Hopefully you'll learn a couple things. We have some time for questions and we focus on that. So this is all about automotive. First of all, just to share, who am I and what do we do at AutoMobility Advisors? We're, I think, what's affectionately known as a boutique consulting agency. That means small. We focus on all kinds of auto technology areas. So it could be connected vehicle services, software-defined vehicle, electric vehicles, charging, mobility, ride sharing, these kinds of things. Our clients tend to be automotive technology companies, sometimes startups, or what we call scale-ups, and they're trying to make their business grow by connecting with automakers directly, tier one suppliers like Bosch, Continental, Denso, those kind of companies directly, other ecosystem partners, maybe charge companies, and we help them do that. We help them organize their messaging, go-to-market value proposition, business development directly. We have a team of 25 to 30-year veterans in automotive. They know lots of folks, so they can get in a lot faster and facilitate those conversations. So that's basically what we do. And by doing that, we're talking to OEMs all the time. Every week I have a call with one or two automakers for some reason about some client or some topic, and I pick up things along the way. Maybe this is part of that. So let's talk about China, China dominance. So you may or may not know, in 2015, China became the largest electric vehicle market in the world. 2015, that's a while ago. So my first point is China's been doing this for a while. They know a lot more than we think. And I think they're also starting to take over some other markets that are good indicators for what's going to happen here. There's a chart here that shows you kind of the different growth, 2020 to 2025. They're 50% of the EV sales in the world now, China. Strategic investments the government has made, of course, have driven some of that, right? They had a Project 20, Made in China 2025 program that they kicked off, $15 billion in R&D funding. So definitely the government is behind a lot of the growth. But that's building vehicles. Now, China already had a big car market 20 years ago when I was working at Ford Motor Company, right? They're trying to build plants in China, JVs in China. There's 250 car companies in China at the time. So there's some consolidation going on. There's still a lot of car companies in China that have small market share, and there's some that have really big market share, like BYD, you've heard of, which is now the global leader in EV sales beyond Tesla, right? Geely, Xiaomi, NIO, all kinds of companies like that you hear about. The other big idea is, I think, I'm trying to remember, but I think it was 2009, I was in Washington, D.C. for an electric vehicle conference, and there was a speaker on a topic I had never really thought about or heard about, called rare earth minerals. And he talked all about the coming issues with dominance by China of rare earth minerals and what that means to the rest of the electric vehicle industry. That was in 2009, quite a while ago. And so now that's a pretty common topic, everybody understands, but effectively what he was talking about hasn't changed. What I see in terms of dominance by China and what's happening is the same status. They still have supply chain dominance, which is going to drive a lot of the issues here. So let's talk about the global automakers. So I spend most of my time dealing with, typical legacy car companies, right? Ford, GM, more and more Hyundai, Kia, which are really fast-growing EV providers in America right now, doing really well. Stellantis, Volkswagen, right? Take a company like Volkswagen. Volkswagen's been in China for a long time, really long time, 30 years maybe. SAIC partnership, companies like that, or FAW, that's what it was. 2 or 3 different joint venture partners. A lot of their sales globally were in China, and those sales have been reduced quite a bit because of the rise of the Chinese brands themselves, right? So VW has to find other markets, and when they come to a market like the US, you're still struggling to buy EVs, right? We're at 10% share, something like that, of sales, 10% of sales. You know, Europe is much higher than that. They sell smaller ID3s in Europe. I just saw Kia talk about the EV3, which is a competitor in Europe to the Chinese car, to the VW car, and they're not going to bring either one of those to the US in this near term, right? Because they're too small. So there's a lot of activity in markets like Europe, but they're also reducing their income in China itself. A company like Tesla gets most of its sales from China. 626,000 cars in 2025 in China. So without China, Tesla doesn't make its money. So the Chinese domestic market is where a lot of the action is. The biggest car market on the planet. There's lots of turmoil. There's still all those Chinese companies. Some have BEV only. Like BYD does BEV and PHEVs, right? So they do both, and they cover the market. And so they're all kind of fighting each other. And so what happens is the Chinese players are trying to figure out, okay, if I'm going to grow, I have to go outside of China, right? Which is why 1 million Chinese cars got imported and sold in the European market last year. That's a lot, right? Brazil right now is an EV market on fire for Chinese cars, right? So they're looking for places to go. And that's because they're battling so hard in the domestic market, right? So, and then of course the government subsidies and other tools that they've had to learn how to be really technologically sophisticated, et cetera. They're starting to work on their brands themselves, right? Instead of just the product itself, but the brand experience. Really, really interesting. Sorry, let's make another point here. Competitive pressure, supply chain I talked about. Competitive pressure is the rest of the car companies on the planet are getting that competitive pressure by China, so they have to react. And we're in this weird place right now, right? Where a year ago, gas was cheap, now it's expensive, right? A year ago, Ford was going to push F-150 Lightnings out the door, and now they're not going to do that anymore, right? I read yesterday that GM is going to not continue to develop, at least near term, its big trucks EV program. It's heavy. Sorry, it's light-duty trucks. 2,500, those kind of vehicles. Toyota simultaneously is working on a Lexus-branded Highlander-based EV to compete with the EV9 from Kia, which is doing really well right now. Big package SUV, lots of families like it. It's not super expensive. Never go to the gas station again. I can see the value story. Toyota's saying, I want to make sure I compete with that. Simultaneously, GM is reducing. Ford is reducing its EV product portfolio. So we have this kind of turmoil. Actually, I was going to read you something. There's a Toyota product called the BZ7, I think it's called. Yeah, BZ7. Did anybody read about this yet? So they launched in China. It was 2 days ago. It was yesterday. They launched in China a big a sedan, like a Tesla Model S. Big, sleek, 4-door sedan, really nice, looks kind of luxury. $21,000, $13,000 less than a Tesla Model S in China, right? So super aggressive pricing. And I was just going to kind of read to you what they said because I thought it was an interesting indicator for the whole story. It says the Toyota BZ7 is so affordable primarily because it's built in China for China. Local battery supply chains, domestic tech partnerships with Huawei and Xiaomi, and fierce competition from rivals like BYD all drive costs down in ways that simply do not exist in the American manufacturing context. Right? Toyota has given no indication the BZ7 will ever arrive in the US, but even if it did, import tariffs, regulatory compliance costs, American labor expenses would almost certainly push the price past $40,000, possibly higher. Right? Even if someone wanted to import one and deal with 100% tariffs, it just isn't possible. It's a car engineered for a market that rewards value above almost everything else. In America, where Toyota sells Tundras and Sequoias at enormous margins, that equation is very different. So we have these issues, right, where EVs taking off all over the world. In Europe, it's continuing to grow. In South America, it's growing. China has a value story with EVs that's really good, and America is just not quite taking it on. You have these barriers and things like that. We'll talk about that. Slide. So let's talk about the Chinese products themselves. You guys have probably been in some in the U.S. My family has a Polestar too. Anybody know what that is? Polestar? They're a spin-off of Volvo. Geely owns Volvo and Polestar both. They have a Polestar 3 and 4 now. Had it for 3 years. It works great. Right? I've been in the car business 30 years. I understand craftsmanship and quality and performance and all these things in hundreds of cars. And it works really well. And that's an example, I think, of the kind of car you're going to start to see. There's some really high-tech cars in China. There's some really interesting things that we don't see here. That once people start to do that, use those features, they'll not want to go back. One thing I learned in the car business a long time ago is that people buy a car with power windows. They never buy a car after that with wind-up windows. Right? They don't go backwards in the feature. They always go forward because they want more of it. And the Chinese are going after that really hard, and they're doing really well. I mentioned earlier, they dominate the resources, right? That whole ingredient piece we all have to deal with. And then they're setting the standards on advanced EV applications. If you notice on this chart, I got this from our friends Alex Partners. This is about level 2 and above ADAS. Everybody may or may not know what advanced driver assistance systems are. That's the Super Cruise and LiDAR cameras and all kinds of things that we use in monocar. Lane keeping, you probably have in your own car. This is kind of showing where is China relative to that penetration relative to the rest of the world. Just on that one thing, on ADAS and level 2 and level 3, etc. I was at CES in January. I don't know if many of you were there, maybe you were. There was a presentation by Markets and Markets on robo-taxis, right? Where's robo-taxi growth? I was actually surprised to learn that, of course, China was the #1 market for robo-taxis and the fastest growing. The robo-taxi prices in China were below regular taxi prices, whereas in the U.S., they're above regular taxi prices. And the U.S. was second fastest growing robo-taxi market. Waymo's going to 50,000 units, for example, from 2,500, I think, today. There's a lot of testing markets you've heard about, Phoenix, Las Vegas, etc. But there's more and more governments that are opening up testing for that. So that market's taking on all the features and in-car experience type features that you would expect in a robo-taxi. Chinese are going to learn how to do really well, and you'll see that in all the regular vehicles too. And then the other interesting thing, I think, is the, let's say, cycle time. So this is a chart also from Alex Partners that says, okay, what is the time in the market? What is the time in the market of any given model? Right, so if you think about a Volkswagen, Nissan, Mercedes sold in China, how long is it out in the market before it's refreshed, updated, etc.? 5.2 years. Chinese legacy brands, Chang'an, I was at Chang'an about 6 years ago in Chongqing, China. Companies like that that are not necessarily making modern EVs, but making regular Chinese cars, so to speak. 3.7 years, so smaller, they're updating and freshening more often. And then China, new energy vehicles, they call it. That's kind of the mix-up of BEVs and PHEVs. When you add them all together, like BYD makes, they call it new energy vehicles. 1.8 years, less than 2 years, less than every 2 years, the Chinese are replacing, updating, freshening, constantly continuing to evolve these vehicles, which means they always have the latest features, they always have the latest technology, comparatively to everybody else that's out there. Now, when I started the car business, Mercedes was at 11 or 12 year cycle time to replace a car. And then we started to get down to 5 or 6. Toyota was at 3 or 4. Honda was at 5 or 6. Toyota's always been a little faster. But the Chinese are at 2. Right? I mean, that's a big deal. And so I think that's going to drive a lot of change too. And then I want to talk about enablers. enablers and barriers. So let's just think about this. This is kind of where's the U.S. And where's China, and how are we helping these guys? Yes or no? So tariffs, yeah, okay, we put tariffs of 100%. Well, if they make it 2.5 times cheaper, they can add the tariff and still be cheap, right? And that's where they're going. Security concerns, under-discussed, under-reported topic. Definitely America, certainly the government has issues with always-on, connected vehicles that are Chinese made, that are reporting to a cloud in North America that's relaying to a cloud in China, right? Just think a hot mic in your car all the time, right? Kind of feel like Alexa a little bit, right? Alexa's listening to you all the time in your house. So, we're kind of comfortable with that, but the government's not that comfortable with it because it goes to China eventually, right? Now, I mentioned Polestar's here. It's made by a Chinese company. Yeah, it's made in North Carolina, actually, I think. Right, the factory is. But, you can hive all that off. You're going to have to deal with that security issue. And then the distribution system. To me, that's a big barrier for the Chinese. It's been even a barrier for companies like Tesla and Rivian and others, right? What is that? Franchised automotive dealers. Franchised automotive dealers are a voting bloc, political donation bloc, unrivaled. They have more connections at the state level than anyone in any industry. And if they decide you're not selling cars in New Jersey unless you go through the dealer, that's what's going to happen. Think about VinFast. You ever heard of VinFast? From the Vin Group, Vietnamese car, SUV. Actually, not a bad car. They're in California. They got a few dealers now. They were trying to go direct, and now they're going through dealer now. Right? Scout is still saying we're going to go direct. We're not going to sell through dealers. Scout's a division of Volkswagen. They're going to launch in 2028 with 2 models. And they're still saying, even last week, Scott Keogh said, we're going to still go direct as the CEO, which sounds good. But, I think ultimately it's challenging. Even Tesla and others have had some issues with that because it limits and restricts where they could be, the cost they have to do it. Manufacturers historically like dealers because they can kind of push it out the factory, send it to the dealer, and then the dealer sells it to the customer, and the dealer takes care of it, and they're done. Right? They send it out and they get paid and they're done. The only thing they have is warranty to worry about. And that's changed the last 10 or 15 years, certainly since OnStar was born 30 years ago, where now I have to deal with customers well beyond when I sell them because they have connected services and other things I have to provide. So which kind of lends itself to the factory direct model at the end of the day. And then on the enabler side, adjacent markets like Canada, right? You may know all about that. Canada agreed not long ago, 49,000 cars you can bring in from China and sell in Canada. They just put a seal on it, right? Okay. A lot of OEMs right now make cars in Canada. Windsor is a very popular place for a car factory if you're Ford, Stellantis, or General Motors. Windsor, Canada, right? And other places. Capability and features, I mentioned them briefly, but they really are working really hard to do that. Have those features. There was a story this past week from, I think it was online under NPR, around NIO and the battery swap, right? Battery swap technology. They have 1,000 battery swap stations in China. NIO does. It takes 5 minutes. So you drive your car in on kind of like a little tent, like a little mini car wash. Think about a car wash. The battery pack comes out the bottom. The battery pack slides over and goes in the top, and you drive it. And it's really fast. 5 minutes? It takes 5 minutes to fill your gas tank with gas. So, the only issue I see, of course, is you're changing lots of battery packs. They have to move around all the time. You have to charge them up. There's some operational issues. They already have 1,000. They're already doing it. Customers are already giving good feedback. Look for those kinds of innovations. The Chinese will come and they'll say, well, you don't have to buy the car. You can lease the car and you can lease the battery pack separately. We'll have a swap system and you can have an upgraded battery pack later on, right? Those kinds of things. Lower cost, absolutely. Directly, they have lower cost. So again, even if the tariff's 100%, There's Chinese companies that could sell. When Toyota builds a car in China, they can sell it for $21,000. That's pretty cheap. The average car, by the way, right now, transaction price is $50,000. $50,000. Now, near term, there's an opportunity for a lot of consumers, which is the used EV market, nearly new EV market, because it's filled with EVs now, and they're all much lower priced. And the batteries, as you guys know better than anyone else, last a long time, right? So we're not where we were with the Nissan Leaf about 15 years ago, when a 3 or 4 year old Leaf only held 50% charge, right? So your 80-mile range at job one in production turned into 50-mile range 3 years later, 4 years later. That's not where we are now. You buy a used EV now, you still have really good range, a very good car, it'll last a long time, you get a good value. You're gonna see a lot of people do that. Experience, I mentioned. Chinese have been building cars for a long time now. They've been learning through joint ventures from US and European car makers for a long time now. They're really getting very, very good at it, and we should not underestimate it. And then technology integration. They're very comfortable with third-party providers and others that help them deliver things, right? Think parking apps and payment apps, buy stuff inside your car, right? Order your restaurant food right on the screen. They can do all that. I think some of the tools they use, they're so used to mobile-friendly in China that they integrate that with the car very easily. And the US automakers still kind of fight with Apple and Google to make that happen, right? So think about it that way. And I mentioned Canada, right? 49,000 cars. This is from just last month, Politico headline. 3 Chinese automakers push to enter Canada in 2026. That's this year. 15 more to follow, right? This is from Automotive News. Stellantis says Stellantis-backed Leap motor delivers more than 100,000 EVs. So you have a US, European conglomerate car maker like Stellantis working directly with Chinese companies like Leap Motor. They have every interest to see Leap Motor build a factory or take over a factory rather in Canada that they can use, that they can have 2 vehicles built on a Chinese vehicle and a Dodge branded Leap Motor. That's where we're going to go. And that car is going to come across the border, and it's going to get tariffed, sure, and it's still going to be cheap, right? And they're going to have that place to build it, and they're going to have their Chinese partner do it for them. So that's where I think things are going to go. All right, and then last really big idea is we're still the U.S. We have to deal with EVs coming our way. First problem is EVs, yes or no. Second problem is Chinese EVs, yes or no, right? So we still have a problem with the first one. We're still at 10%. We're not dominant. EVs are not dominant. We have administrations that encourage electric cars, and we have administrations that discourage electric cars. Customers don't know what to do. Now they're all looking at EVs again, especially used EVs, because of the gas prices they see. But we have to kind of move beyond that. In Norway, 90% of the cars sold right now are electric vehicles. In Europe, most of the cars sold are electric vehicles. In Brazil, more and more of the cars are electric vehicles. Because they're, very good. And customers see that. And customers see the value, and they don't want to pay for the fuel, et cetera, et cetera. So I think we still have that issue. And the other one is regulatory. Chinese, when they come, they still got to pass all the FMVSS, we call it, Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standards, all those kinds of things. They got to deal with all the US-centric issues. They got to put factories down maybe and invest in that. It's going to take a little while. And then market dynamics, just the idea of preferences US customer has versus Chinese customer. I mentioned that BZ7 from Toyota, right? A sedan, sleek sedan, inexpensive, high-tech. Sedans are not a big seller in America anymore. SUVs and pickup trucks are big sellers. The Kia EV9 is what's selling because it's so large, big family vehicle that's an EV. So they have to think differently. They have to start making big, call it package, which means the interior space, big package vehicles to try and, conquest the US customer. They're not going to do it with sports cars. They're going to do it with SUVs and bigger vehicles. Yep, and I think that was it. Right. Last slide. So they're going to expand globally. They're looking for markets because they're fighting each other in their home market. So they're looking for other markets. America's just another market they're looking at. They're going to start working on branding a lot more. You're going to learn about what BYD is. You're going to learn about NIO. You're going to learn about these brands, Xiaomi, that you never heard of before. And you're going to understand and watch them try to get good at the marketing side, which will be a lot of fun to watch, actually. And then because they have, EV dominance in China, solar, they're pretty far down the road on sustainability overall. Solid state batteries, storage in your house, all kinds of things that you're going to see are going to be driven, in my view at least, because of the Chinese market. So that's it. I encourage you to go to our website, automobilityadvisors.com. You can download a copy of the paper I mentioned. I think there's a few other papers there as well, so you may have to scroll down a little bit. But I hope you enjoy it, and happy to take maybe 1 or 2 questions in the 1 or 2 minutes we have.